For centuries, the most dangerous being in Middle-earth wasn't marching an army or building a fortress. He was simply waiting, quietly, in a forest, letting fear do his work for him. Long before Sauron ever declared himself again, he was already back, hidden inside a dark hill in the south of a forest called Greenwood, wearing a name that sounded like a lesser evil. The Necromancer. Not the Dark Lord. Not yet. Just a rumor, a shadow, something to be afraid of without quite knowing why. Tonight we don't just ask why he hid there, we ask what it cost the people living in that shadow, waiting years for someone to name what they already sensed. Sauron's patience here is worth sitting with, because it tells you something quietly terrifying about who he actually was. After his defeat at the end of the Second Age, he had lost almost everything: his body, his armies, his tower, and worst of all, the ring that held the greater part of his power. A lesser being, humiliated that completely, might have rushed to rebuild as fast and as loudly as possible. Sauron did the opposite. He understood that revealing himself too soon, while still weak, would unite every free people left standing against him before he was ready. So instead of announcing his return, he became something almost worse than an enemy. He became an unconfirmed fear. That's the part that should unsettle you more than any army. Sauron chose to let an entire forest rot slowly, deliberately, rather than move quickly and risk exposure. Patience, at that scale, isn't a virtue. It's a kind of cruelty measured in centuries. Picture what that meant for the people actually living near that darkening wood. Thranduil's realm didn't wake up one day to war. It watched its borders shrink, year after year, as the forest itself seemed to turn against them. Trees growing sicker, paths growing more dangerous, light struggling to reach the forest floor. Imagine living through that slow erosion, watching your home become less safe by degrees, so gradual that no single year felt like the moment everything changed. That's a particular kind of grief Tolkien rarely gets credit for capturing. Not the grief of sudden loss, but the grief of watching something beautiful die slowly, with no single villain to point to yet. And across the river, in Lothlorien, Galadriel felt something else entirely. The growing certainty of knowing exactly what was gathering strength nearby, long before anyone else was ready to believe her. There's a particular loneliness in that kind of knowledge. To sense a returning darkness clearly, and to watch the people around you debate and delay, and hope it's something smaller than it is, while you already know precisely what it is, and precisely how patient it can be. That loneliness becomes devastating when we look at what happened to Thráin. Thorin's father wandered into that same darkening region, searching for answers about his lost homeland, and Dol Guldur swallowed him. He was imprisoned in the dark for years, not killed quickly, not granted the mercy of a fast ending, but held, broken slowly, stripped of the last dwarven ring he carried, until Gandalf finally found him dying in a dungeon most of Middle-earth didn't yet know existed. Think about what that imprisonment actually was, emotionally, not just strategically. A father, taken from his family, forgotten by most of the world, spending his final years in absolute darkness, with no one coming, because no one yet understood there was anyone left to save. When Gandalf finally reaches him, it isn't a rescue, it's a goodbye. Thráin has just enough life left to pass on a map and a key, the very objects that will eventually put his son on the road to reclaiming their home, before he dies in the dark, having given everything he had left to a future he'd never see. He never learns whether any of it mattered. He never sees his son's face again, never hears whether the map found its way home, never knows if the years he spent in that darkness bought anything at all. He simply gives what remains of himself to a hope he has to trust will outlive him, and closes his eyes not knowing. That's the quiet tragedy tangled up in this entire story. While Bilbo is stumbling through Mirkwood with a small band of dwarves, worrying about spiders and hunger and an unfriendly elf king, an entire hidden war of patience and grief is already unfolding just beneath the surface of his adventure. The forest he's struggling through isn't simply inconvenient. It's the site of someone else's decade of suffering, someone he'll never meet, whose death will quietly shape the rest of the story Bilbo is about to walk into. And there's Gandalf, carrying a weight none of his companions fully understand. He suspects the truth about the necromancer long before he can prove it, which means he spends years watching a slow catastrophe take shape, while most of the world insists on more comfortable explanations. When he finally confirms what he feared, that the shadow in Mirkwood is Sauron himself, already gathering strength, already searching for his lost ring, he carries that knowledge back to a council that should act immediately, and doesn't. Here's where the story becomes almost unbearably human. The White Council fails to act quickly, not from stupidity, but because Saruman, the one person with the authority to move things forward, has quietly begun wanting the ring for himself, and delay serves that secret hunger far better than urgency would. Gandalf brings real warning to people capable of real action, and watches it get absorbed into caution that sounds wise but isn't. That's a particular kind of heartbreak. Being right, being believed enough to be listened to, and still being slowed down by someone else's quiet self-interest. By the time the council finally acts, and Sauron is driven from Dol Guldur, the victory is real but incomplete in a way that should trouble us more than it usually does. Sauron isn't destroyed, he simply withdraws, having already prepared exactly where he intends to go next. Within a few years, Barad-dûr rises openly, and the shadow that patiently haunted a forest for a lifetime becomes, without much surprise to those who understood what they were watching, the very same war everyone had feared and delayed against for decades. Maybe that's the real emotional core of this story, buried beneath the geography and the timeline. Sauron's greatest weapon during those long hidden years wasn't an army, or even the search for his ring. It was time itself, used patiently and cruelly, worn down slowly into the people forced to live inside his shadow, into a king who watched his forest sicken by degrees, into a father who died in darkness having done everything right and still lost everything, into a wizard who saw the truth clearly and still had to wait and wait and wait for the world to catch up to what he already knew. Sometimes the most dangerous kind of harm isn't the one that arrives suddenly. It's the one patient enough to let you doubt yourself for years before it finally proves you were right all along. If this story moved you, there are more waiting, quiet corners of Middle-earth that history remembers but rarely feels. Subscribe and walk them with us.